What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we have a Slade Top 10 brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter, patron of the channel, and Slade superfan, Evan David. Evan David, always appreciate you. I only know one Slade song, Runaway. It was big in maybe 84 here in the States when I was 13. So that's all I knew, and after we got on this channel, I learned that Slade was actually huge over in the UK, but I had no idea. So Evan David's been promising this list for a while. He writes all the research for this. There's nothing more I can find on these groups, man. But he's going to educate us. I'll give you an upfront. The songs aren't in the video because they'll get blocked on YouTube for copyright. So check out the Vimeo link below. So if you want to do that, just go ahead and go there now. That way I don't tell you when I'm done with all the quick facts, because the quick facts aren't too quick, but they are very, very informative. Well, Evan David says, rock and roll legend has it that the powerhouse glam rock phenom that would become Slade was first formed in 1966 in the city of Wolverhampton when flamboyant guitarist Dave Hill and stalwart drummer Don Powell recruited both the budding multi-instrumentalist talents of bassist Jim Lee as well as the raucous, booming vocals of singer and guitarist Noddy Holder. Over the next few years, the In-Betweens would both garner an incredibly formidable reputation as a live band, including playing memorable stints in both West Germany and the Bahamas, with the latter experience in particular doing much to forge their future bonds of togetherness as a band which would stand them in good stead in future years. As Noddy Holder way to put it, what made Slade special was the teamwork was real. We were at our best when we were working together and all heading in the same direction, off stage as well as on. That was the magic of Slade, 4 pieces of a jigsaw fitting together perfectly. We were just 4 lads from the Black Country who were catapulted to fame at a time when being top of the charts meant you'd sold literally millions of records. Our energy and enthusiasm were so infectious, it was less a case of us not knowing what hit us than the rest of the world not knowing what had hit them. I'm sure part of our mass appeal was that our fans recognized that we never fell into the trap of trying to be cool. We wouldn't have had a clue anyway. Upon finally returning to Britain, the In-Betweens began releasing a handful of unsuccessful singles as well as a debut album, the latter under their new name of Ambrose Slade, which they had adopted in 1969, a name allegedly inspired by one of their then record company's secretaries who had a habit of naming her belongings and had duly dubbed her handbag Ambrose and her shoes Slade before finally shortening their name to Slade, which makes sense, a year or so later at the behest of their recently found new producer-manager, former Animals bassist and ex-manager of Jimi Hendrix, Chaz Chandler, who generally regarded them as a breath of fresh air and was becoming an increasingly dull pop music climate in his view. As Dave Hill put it, in the 60s, everybody played with their heads down. There was no real contact with the audience. The crowd sat cross-legged on the floor. It was hippies getting stoned, but we were cocky. We put on a show. We had a theatrical element to us, and Chaz, having worked with Hendrix, saw the potential in that and liked the showmanship side of things. He was ambitious, but so were we, and it was a good match in that sense. But the most important thing was that he could recognize a good song. He could bottle that live excitement and then put it on tape. Moreover, the ever-canny Chandler not only encouraged his new charges to evolve musically by writing their own songs, which was odd back then, but was also constantly seeking to enhance their visual publicity garnering potential to boot, most famously by briefly adopting the short-haired hooligan-esque image of the notorious skinhead youth culture that was emerging in Britain at the time, much to the chagrin of budding clothes horse Dave Hill in particular. Despite or perhaps because of Chandler's constant efforts in this vein, however, it would nevertheless not be until 1971 that both his and the no longer skinhead Slade's efforts finally paid off in terms of chart success. One of the band's most popular live numbers, a barnstorming cover of Little Richard's Get Down and Get With It, was finally captured in the studio in a way which allowed it to evoke all of the hand-clapping, foot-stomping, terrace chant power that it had newly acquired on stage. The resulting tune thus fit in perfectly with the requirements of a new post-60s musical era. For as Jim Lee later said, looking back on it now, I realize that people by the 70s just wanted to have a good time. Flower power had gone, the serious message had gone, it was just time to have fun. Significantly, Get Down and Get With It would thus not only provide Slade with their first chart breakthrough as it eventually reached a heady number 16 in the UK, but also finally allow them to make their first appearance on the legendary Top of the Pops TV show in the process, an arena which would soon become synonymous with Slade during the early 70s. As Jim Lee later put it, I remember when we first went to the Top of the Pops, the sets were being held up with tape, and it was all a bit sort of tatty, and it wasn't that wonderful ball that we see on TV. You could see the cracks in the joins, and you could see it being stuck together, and such is the arrogance of youth. I looked at this, and I thought, we can take this, we can do this. The initial success would swiftly gather even more momentum with the release of Slade's next single, Coz I Luv You, which was written by what would become the band's go-to in-house songwriting team of Holder and Lee. with the deliberately misspelled song title based upon the phonetic dialect of their native black country region, signaling what would become an indelible Slade hallmark over the next few years, as would their outlandishly dressed appearances on the aforementioned Top of the Pops, which Holder would later fondly recall as follows. We never got fed up of doing Top of the Pops. I mean, your first appearance is wonderful. Your first hit appearance is better still. Your first #1 appearance is like out of this world. When you get that call on Tuesday morning telling you that you're #1 on the charts, that's what you've been thinking of all these years when you've been in front of the mirror with your cricket bat or your tennis racket pretending you're a pop star. Don't forget, in those days, we were appearing every Thursday night in front of 18 to 20 million people. You know, you'd be freaked out now if you had an audience like that in Britain. But back then, whole families sat in front of that television, sat religiously on a Thursday. And so everybody in the country virtually saw you, which was the beauty of these shows in the 60s and 70s in the UK and also here in the States. Small wonder then that Slade were officially the most successful singles group of the 70s in the UK, bar none, as they went on to achieve no less than 17 UK top 20 hits between 71 and 76, a staggering 6 of which made #1, with 5 more reaching either numbers 2 or 3, while also achieving a further 5 top 10 hits in the UK albums charts to boot, including their seminal live album, Slade Alive. Indeed, they had apparently sold 50 million records worldwide by the end of the 20th century. Such a level of British chart success had not been seen since the heyday of the Fab Four themselves. A connection which Dave Hill, for one, will later see as being no accident, for as he put it, Chaz's thinking was that the country was still looking for the next Beatles. There was a very definitive sense of that. The talk in the music press was always about them reforming, or if not, who was going to replace him. Chaz was convinced it was going to be us because we had a lot of versatility in Slade. We had 2 excellent writers who were starting to come to the fore. We had musical styles where all of us were bringing something different in. We had distinct personalities, so there were different things for different fans to pick up on. Plus, there were 4 of us, and the Beatles had proved visually that was really strong. I always remember Chaz saying, people are looking for the next Beatles, here they are. That's what he believed. I think also in our favor was that we were a band who were very much about having a good time, about enjoying yourself. And that was important in a country where things weren't going all that great economically. It was all a bit depressing. We were a bit of an antidote to that. We were colorful, we were funny, a bit daft. We made people smile, and that was something different at the time when music had gone very serious. We were a good time band, and people needed that. Moreover, Slade were also still impressively powerful as a live band to boot, as demonstrated both by their oft riotous appearances at venues such as the Lincoln Festival, the London Palladium, and especially Earl's Court, where they performed to an 18,000 strong crowd in '73, while also achieving new heights of popularity outside the UK in places such as Australia, Scandinavia, and other parts of Europe, including, unbeknownst to the band at the time, an underground level in the Soviet Union, which back then was way dangerous. As rock critic David Hepworth later put it, Slade toured with an intensity that hasn't been equaled since. Nobody came away from a Slade show without understanding they had been entertained, and entertained by a band who didn't look down on them. Even as Slade were at their peak of their commercial success, however, their seemingly unstoppable momentum was in fact nearly arrested for good on 4th of July 1973 when Don Powell suffered a horrific car crash in Wolverhampton, which not only killed the other occupant of the car, his then girlfriend Angela Morris, but left the drummer in a coma with life-threatening injuries. Indeed, were it not for the literally life-saving efforts of 2 off-duty nurses who were in the area and tended Powell until an ambulance came, he would most likely have not survived. In that event, Slade itself would most likely have not survived either, for as Noddy Holder later insisted, I always swore that if Don hadn't made it through the terrible crash and his awful injuries, I would break up the band. Without Don behind us, there was no Slade for me. He was our anchor. Instead, Powell, who regained consciousness 6 days after the crash, which had not only left him with 5 broken ribs, as well as 2 broken ankles, but also with recurring acute short memory loss problems, which would plague him for many years to come, as well as a permanent loss of taste and smell. Oh man. He was nevertheless able to join Slade at the Record Plant Studios in New York a mere 10 weeks later, where he and the rest of the band would record the tune that would ultimately give them true musical immortality in the UK from then on, namely the iconic Yuletide classic Merry Christmas Everybody, which would eventually become the group's 6th and final UK #1 upon its release as a single in, of course, December of 1973, before perennially returning to the seasonal charts on several occasions over future decades leading up to the present day, as Dave Hill later commented in his autobiography. I remember he used a corridor to get an echo on the vocals when we were all stood there surrounded by these Americans going to work in the building, watching these mad Brits singing about Bloody Christmas when it was still baking hot in New York. It was an amazing record because it not only looked at the band when we needed it, it did the same for the country. It was as if we were saying we've all survived the year, Slade and Britain, so let's celebrate. It was also at the Record Plant sessions that no less a figure than John Lennon, who had just finished recording his own album Mind Games, there allegedly overheard a recording of a Slade track which Chandler was mixing, told him, I love that bloke's voice. He sounds like me. While Slade would continue to have several major chart hits during 1974 as well, however, by the end of that year, their commercial fortunes had nevertheless begun to wane somewhat, coinciding with the beginning of the end for the wider glam rock era in Britain in general. Even as musical fashions began to change, moreover, the band themselves were also attempting to explore new musical horizons to boot. An effort perhaps best encapsulated by the often poignant soundtrack album to Slade's first, as it turned out, only feature film, Slade in Flame, which would itself be released the next year. The movie itself starred the members of Slade, not as humorously exaggerated versions of themselves as in the Beatles' own A Hard Day's Night movie a decade earlier, rather as members of a fictitious band called Flame, in what was a somewhat surprisingly gritty look at the behind-the-scenes shenanigans surrounding the British music industry during the 1960s. While the movie has since garnered much critical acclaim in recent years, however, music critic and Slade fan Chris Ingham would later comment at the time, it also marked the end of their reign as the UK's favorite band. Slade's audience were used to nod and the boys delivering a raucous good time, whereas the movie's bleak, sour atmosphere had understandably confused rather than enthused fans. There's a pervading sense that Slade and Flame was the sound of a grown-up Slade. Their audience may not be prepared to grow up with them. These problems would be exacerbated still further by the band's decision to move to the U.S. full-time in 1975 in what would be Slade's most sustained effort to date to finally break the one major territory that eluded their all-conquering grasp. In the process, Slade would unconsciously provide a key seminal influence to several key future American musicians, including the likes of Joey Ramone, who said that, quote, "I spent most of the early 70s listening to Slade alive, thinking to myself, wow, is that what I want to do? I want to make that kind of, oh wow, this is what I want to do. I want to make that kind of intensity for myself." We have a Ramones top 10 up for Evan David. Check it out after this. A couple years later, I was at CBGB's doing my best naughty holder, and especially Gene Simmons, who later acknowledged Slade as Kiss's biggest musical influence, saying, "We liked the way they connected with the crowd and the way they wrote anthems. We wanted that same energy, that same irresistible simplicity. Indeed, the embryonic Cheap Trick would coin their very name after seeing a Slade gig, after bassist Tom Peterson commented that Slade had used every cheap trick in the book to entertain the audience." Wow, I did not know that. Ultimately, however, and despite spending the best part of 2 years thus touring the U.S., Slade were somehow unable to translate their sterling live efforts to American chart success at this juncture, for reasons which remain disputed to this day. Naughty Holder believes that Slade simply never carried themselves in a sufficiently big-time manner to impress the American music industry, while former Slade roadie Graham Swinnerton felt that, quote, "America was not ready and did not want Slade. They were a good time, happy band. America was coming out of Watergate, Vietnam. All it wanted to do was feel sorry for itself. It was not looking for a good time." Dave Hill, meanwhile, summed up what he saw as the reasons behind Slade's ongoing stateside dilemma as follows. "In the early part of the 1970s, the fact that Slade were such a diverse group was one of our strengths in the UK, Europe, and Australia, places where we were absolutely huge. We could appeal to the pop fans. We had that reflective ballad side to us. And then on the albums and on stage, we were a good hard rocking group as well. We'd got a lot of things cooking, and that was to our advantage because we reached out across the spectrum of music fans. But in America, it's a different story. This was really good. I mean, I've already read all this before, but I thought this was great. They liked to put music into pigeonholes because that tended to be the way FM radio was organized over there. You had rock stations, blues stations, pop, country. You knew what you were going to get. The programmers never knew which one of those to put us in. That is a great point and probably shut out a lot of great bands from the American market. Regardless of the reason why, Slade thus returned home to the UK in 1977 to what might have been seen as the worst of both worlds. They've been unable to break the American market, and at least some British fans felt that the band had rather neglected their pre-existing native fan base while trying to do so. Add to that an increasing estrangement from Chandler, from whom they eventually parted company in 1981, that radical shift in musical trends that had recently given birth to the likes of punk in the UK and elsewhere, and Slade appeared to be dangerously out of fashion in their homeland by this point. And while they gamely continued to tour and make records during this increasingly lean period, by the early 80s the band were apparently on the verge of breakup, with Dave Hill for one going so far as to investigate the possibilities of starting a wedding car business using the gold Rolls Royce that he had purchased in the height of Slade's fame, of all things. At the 11th hour, however, Slade were invited to fill a last-minute slot that had opened up in the lineup of 1980's Reading Festival when the previously booked Ozzy Osbourne had to drop out due to his new solo band not yet being ready. And after persuading the initially reluctant Hill, they gleefully grabbed the opportunity with both hands, with Jim Lee describing the electrifying atmosphere that followed. "We had to pay to park in the public area with no roadies. We had to carry our own gear, and there was even trouble getting in the backstage area. It was hot and dusty, and we felt like gunslingers at high noon. We're strutting through this area in a line and holding up someone else's roller behind us. I refused to move. Why should I? I'd written more bloody hits than the rest of the bill put together. I had the bit between my teeth that afternoon. I looked at all these posers and I knew we could do it. Everyone was staring at us. I wanted to hammer them all into the ground." After this triumphant live comeback, a duly revitalized Slade would by and large adopt a somewhat heavier music style in order to fit in with their new hard rock metal audience. But it was a more Celtic jig sounding tune, Run Runaway, which I was referencing, which would finally see them crack the US marketplace a few years later, with their accompanying video also garnering much heavy airplay on MTV to boot. I can attest to that. Prior to this late revival in Slade's US fortune, the ground had already been paved for them by the American group Quiet Riot, whose cover of two classic Slade songs, namely Come On Feel the Noise and Mama We're All Crazy Now, the former of which would reach a heady number 5 in the US Billboard charts, had revived US record company interest in Slade's current output, with Run Runaway reaching number 20 in the same Billboard charts in the 1984 as a result. And I had that album everybody did. It was called Metal Health, that Come On Feel the Noise was on. I didn't know Slade wrote it till years later. On the back of this success, Slade were then booked to open for Ozzy Osbourne's US tour in the same year, which could indeed should have been the band's finally crack America after so many years of trying, with Ozzy himself later insisting that, quote, Noddy Holder's got one of the greatest voices in rock ever. This should have been the biggest thing since the Beatles in America. Once again, however, it was not to be, this time due to Jim Lee collapsing on stage at a warm-up gig and eventually being diagnosed with hepatitis C as a result. Lee's health problems, coupled with Holder's increasing disenchantment with the rigors of the road amidst difficulties in his own personal life at this time, would ultimately see the band stop touring at this point. And although Slade would continue to release new music and make TV appearances to promote it all the way into the early 90s, by that point, the heart had effectively gone out of it for both Lee and Holder, the latter of whom later commented, I mean, rock and roll's like that, you know, who's to know what would have happened if we'd done the Ozzy tour? Nobody knows, but every rock and roll band has a roller coaster career. Probably ours more than most. I'd like Slade to be remembered that we made them laugh. Even after Lee and Holder both finally called it a day with Slade back in 1992, however, the non-songwriting members of the band, Hill and Powell, would eventually simply recruit new members and resume touring as Slade 2, which they still continue to do, heading into the 2020s. Lee would continue working as a producer, while also becoming involved in both psychotherapy and the property business as well, while Holder would go on to be an actor, radio presenter, and beloved all-around media personality, being awarded an MBE for services to show business in 2000. In the meantime, moreover, the sometimes underestimated influence of Slade upon the wider musical landscape has also grown steadily stronger over the years. For as well as the artists already mentioned above, Slade has also been cited over the years by acts such as Nirvana, the Smashing Pumpkins, the Sex Pistols, the Clash, Motley Crue, Quiet Riot, Poison, Def Leppard, Twisted Sister, The Undertones, The Replacements, and Runaways, who themselves memorably covered Mama We're All Crazy Now, Hanoi Rocks, Girls' School, The Damned, The Wonder Stuff, and especially Oasis, who also covered Come On Feel the Noise, with Noel Gallagher describing their huge influence upon him in particular as follows. No Slade, no Oasis. It's as devastating and as simple as that. I felt their songs could have been written at the end of my street in a house just like mine. I loved them as a child in the 70s, and I grew to love them even more in the 90s. What's not to love? Indeed, this love for Slade is still widespread both here in the UK and elsewhere, with Dave Hill noting that I still get people coming up to me and saying, thanks for making our youth so great. We were never specific or political with our songs, but we provided classic rock and roll numbers, which are still entertaining for any generation. Slade are timeless if you listen carefully to the music and the songs, and I was very proud to be a part of the band and their success. And finally, Evan David says, as such, even as we get closer and closer to the festive season with which Slade will always be synonymous in the UK, I feel it's important to note that their joyous music is in fact for life, not just for Christmas. And as someone whose mom loved Slade in the 70s and who grew to love them myself to boot after buying a compilation cassette of their greatest hits as a teen in the mid-90s, I am proud to play my own small part in reintroducing the fantastic body of work of the Ultimate People's Band to audiences both old and new via RTTC, and I really hope that you all dig this hopefully fun top 10, but as ever, feel free to make your own Slade top 10s in the comments below. Well, we're going to start this off. There's going to be a lot of YouTube videos in here. This is going to be a YouTube video. Coz I Love You at number 10. Evan David says, as already mentioned above, this literally stomping tune will go on to become Slade's first UK number 1, following its release in October of 71, an outcome which a delighted Chaz Chandler had already predicted upon first hearing an acoustic rendition of it in the studio, despite the band's own early misgivings that, as Jim Lee later put it, we thought, this is no good, this is really wet. Moreover, Lee also described the initial creative impetus behind the tune as follows. I got the idea for this rhythm. Nod and I were into Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli. I took my violin, I went over and knocked on Nod's door, so his mom made a cup of cocoa, and I said, I've got an idea, this rhythm and shuffle. Half an hour later, the cocoa was drunk, and Coz I Love You was born, and it was a number 1 like that. So he wants us to react to this for once genuinely live performance of this tune, not from Top of the Pops, but rather from Slade's appearance on Granada TV's Set of 6 TV series on the 13th of June, 1972, in which amply demonstrates both the crowd-pleasing nature of the tune itself and Slade's own increasing sense of self-confidence as performers of the time. As Dave Hill put it, quote, "You're at number one in the charts. You still could be considered as a pop group. You're still not serious like The Who, the Stones, and the Beatles. You're just starting. But you've just had your first big one." All right, let's check out the video. All right, "Coz I Love You." Lyrically, not a lot. Just, he's saying he'll do all this stuff because he loves her. I thought the vocals were really good. I thought the instrumentation was on point. I like the performance more than I like the song. The song's fine. I mean, I don't love it. I don't hate it. It's fine. It's not a bad song. But the performance was really good. And they basically insisted the crowd get into it. I think that's what you got to do sometimes as a band. People come to the studio, and they're sitting there, and they're like, okay, I'm just going to sit here and clap. And they made you get into it. So I thought it was a really good way to kick this top 10 off. Now we're on to number 9. You actually see it below. There's only 2 Spotify tunes. Obviously, this is one of them. "How Does It Feel?" taken from the aforementioned Slade in Flame movie soundtrack album. This wistful, evocative ballad, the melody to which Lee had, in fact, first concocted while still a schoolboy, might be seen as something of an outlier in terms of most of Slade's unusual prior output in their career. For as Noddy Holder later pointed out, musically with Slade, we wrote and recorded happy, catchy, uplifting songs, which are the hardest to do. We did do some cracking ballads, but generally we were party central. Nevertheless, while this beautiful tune may indeed have only reached a comparatively lowly by Slade's then lofty standards, number 15 upon its UK singles chart release in February of '75. In more recent years, however, it has often been cited by Slade fans and critics alike as being amongst the band's very best tunes, while Oasis's Noel Gallagher, for one, even going so far as to claim that "How Does It Feel" is easily one of the best songs ever written in the history of pop ever. All right. "How Does It Feel?" Obviously, Noddy sounded great on the vocals. Jim Lee with the flute in there. I said the members of Gonzalez on the brass section. Just really, really well done. Basically just asking, how does it feel? Do you know how it feels to find love? And after all this time of searching, really good song, almost 6 minutes long, which kind of surprises me. A song written like this would be that long, but I do really like it. Now we'll move back to YouTube with number 8, "Squeeze Me, Please Me." Originally released as a non-album single in June of '73, this irresistibly simple but overpowering tune, albeit with some potentially slightly dodgy lyrics in places by 2021 standards perhaps, with Noddy Holder in particular at his screaming vocal best, would go on to match his predecessor, Come On Feel the Noise's previous charts feats, by also giving Slade a UK number 1, their 5th upon its week of release. This is a fan-edited video of it being played at Slade's massive Earl's Court concert shortly prior to the crash, an event which has since been cited as symbolizing the very peak of Slade's success, and yet another apt demonstration of the band's sheer power as a live act. After watching it, moreover, I'm sure you'll agree, Noddy Holder, who once said that a Slade show was an event. We wanted to make the band and audience as one, with no mental barrier between us. We were one of the loudest bands on the planet, and for 20 years, doing gigs all over the world, we always gave 100% on stage. The atmosphere was pandemonium, and even all these years on, people come up to me and tell us about when they saw us live. They remember the shows vividly, the music, the costumes, the lights, the between songs patter, the audience participation, and importantly, how they felt when they got home. It was an experience and something that has stayed with them and still makes them smile when they remember that special night. I can't ask for any more than that. That is true. "Squeeze Me, Please Me." We won't go into the lyrics. It's fine. It's 1973. I don't think any offense was meant, but we won't get into all that. But it's about the performance, right? Once again, a well-written song in the fact that when he says that you know how to squeeze me, you know how to please me, then you get the whoa, because I was even doing it as a callback towards the end. So it's a great audience participation and everybody can get into it. Once again, a really good performance. I know it didn't quite match up, but watching them perform live, lots of charisma. I could see why people thought they were a fun live band. Let's move on to number 7. It's called Far, Far Away, another Slade and Flame tune. This returned to more ballad-like territory about a world-weary traveler who may have enjoyed his experiences, but who nevertheless now wants to return home, would make number 2 in the UK charts upon its release as a single in October of 1974, and has since been described by Noddy Holder himself as his own favorite Slade song, claiming that the atmosphere, the feel of it, the melody and the lyric, it all sat into place. Holder had in fact come up with the memorable line, "I've seen the yellow lights go down the Mississippi," while sitting on a hotel balcony in Memphis, Tennessee, while on tour in the U.S., and Chaz Chandler then immediately urged him to go away and write the rest of it, which he did with Jim Lee, then later helping to develop the song further, and especially the chorus. "The results for me," Evan David says, "are particularly spellbinding, as are the extremely bright all-white outfits matching those seen on the Slade and Flame covers, which a band are wearing in this promotional clip that we're going to watch, which was taken from the Dutch TV show Top Pop. Far, Far Away. Really enjoyed that. That Naughty sounded fantastic on her best vocal performance. I also like that they were all dressed in those bright white suits. I do like their charismatic stage performances. I like the way they dress, flamboyant, all that good stuff. It all lends to the show. But for this song, as good as it was vocally, I think that might have taken away from it. So I just like the straight up delivery. So far, that one is my favorite, but we're not even halfway done. Let's go to number 6, and we have our second final Spotify track below. You see it. Number 6, The Bangin' Man, originally released as a non-album single in June of '74, reaching number 3 in the UK charts. This somewhat risque double entendre account of the morning after the wild night before was apparently inspired by Slade roadie Graham Swinnerton, whose unenviable task it was to bang on the band's hotel room doors each morning while on tour, so as to wake them up in time to head on to the next stop on the tour. There you have it, The Bangin' Man. Great harmonies on that, right? Very anthemic chorus, good performance by Naughty, great guitar work on there. So enjoyed that one. You know, it is the double entendre. There's not a lot to the lyrics, so it didn't have to be. I mean, there's a lot to the lyrics. I mean, it has a story. I just mean there's not a lot to break down. It's pretty straightforward and obvious, but kind of a clever little play on words. And yeah, enjoyed that one. We're halfway through this list now. Let's go to the top half. All right, number 5, My Oh My. Evan David says first released as a UK single in November of '83, whereupon it reached number 2 in the charts during the Christmas period. This truly anthemic tune would see Slade take their customary skill at crafting terrace chant-style sing-alongs and refine it into full-blown 80s power ballad territory. What a combination, right? With Dave Hill recalling its genesis as follows, quote, Jim wanted to write a song like Rod Stewart's Sailing. I remember he was on about how he'd never written a song where the melody keeps repeating itself, but still sounds just the same melody. They played the demo for me, and I must admit I got a tingle off it. We recorded this song, and I took it home and played it to the family, and they all went, that's great. Slade had got a sound of their own, but they weren't contemporary. But My Oh My sounded right on the radio. It was a good song, a simple song. You could sing to it. You could join in. Once again, the audience were joining in on a Slade record, and the record company loved it, end quote. So much so, indeed, Evan David says that this tune will be chosen as the follow-up single to Slade's long-awaited U.S. breakthrough hit, Run, Run Away, in June of '84, peaking in turn at number 37. So maybe I know this because we're going to watch the official video. I'll let you know. I spent a lot of time on MTV at this time in my life. All right, My Oh My, I definitely knew that song. Used to listen to that song because I had this cassette, right, that Run, Run Away was on. Enjoyed it. The video's pretty good. I liked at the end, it's just, they're out in the country at first. And the truck driver, it turns out to be a girl. You got to get the girl shot in there, in the early 80s, early to mid 80s. Do you need a helmet to drive a truck? Probably not. Never seen it. But, I like the mystery of it all. But, the culmination of it's when they're all together, and we can all swing together. My oh my, everybody doing the hands together. I mean, the genesis of the song is the fact that, we all need love and we can love together, my oh my, all these different things. It's unity, right? We can't do this alone. We need each other. So even though this song came out in the early to mid 80s, it's much more relevant even now. So really did enjoy that one. Now we're going to go to another song that I know very well, although I've never heard the Slade version. We have Come On, Feel the Noise, originally issued at number 4, by the way, originally issued as a non-album single in the UK in February of '73, where it not only became Slade's 4th number 1, but also was the first UK single to achieve that lofty pinnacle on its first week of release since the Beatles' Get Back 4 years earlier. This wild anthemic rocker, later covered by both Quiet Riot and Oasis, was a testament to Slade's no-nonsense, high-volume approach to making their music, having first been inspired, according to Noddy Holder himself, by, quote, a gig where the audience were roaring. It was just rattling the walls, amazing volumes, and to get over our volume was even more amazing. So this one night they were shouting so hard that you could actually feel it in your chest. You could feel the thunderous applause and that in your body. And so I came up with Come On, Feel the Noise. As such, this tune amply showcases the sonic impact of Holder's foghorn voice at its most primal. It's from Top of the Pops in '73. Evan David says it also serves an equally strong showcase for another crucial element of Slade's public appeal, namely the sheer eccentric visual appeal of the slew of ever more outlandish on-screen outfits worn by Dave Hill, including the so-called metal nun costume worn here. Come On, Feel the Noise. Obviously, I know that song very well, but I know the Quiet Riot version. I've never heard this version. Sounds great. Noddy's voice is so powerful, right? And Kevin DuBrow, who was the lead singer of Quiet Riot at the time, they cover this song. He basically just tries to copy Noize's voice. I think he sounds almost just exactly like him. So Quiet Riot's version has a little more drumming to it, so it's a little stronger, even more rocking, but I really enjoyed this version of it. And you know, just the performance and getting everybody involved as they do in all these performance clips. I've seen it. And very smart songwriting. The fact it's an anthemic chorus, obviously a very anthemic chorus, and you just repeat it a ton at the end because it really sticks with people. It makes them want to hear the song again. It's one of those songwriting techniques that is very underrated if you want to write a catchy song. And this song was really important with Quiet Riot, so it shows you Slade's impact a decade later when Quiet Riot has a hit with it. Quiet Riot had been around for over 10 years. I mean, they were originally founded by Randy Rhoads and another guy. Randy was out of the band. By this point, he was with Ozzy, and by the point this hit, he had tragically passed away. But the song went to number 5 in the U.S. and was the first heavy metal song ever to hit the Hot 100, let alone number 5. So this shows you Slade's impact even all those years later here in America. And speaking of Quiet Riot and Slade, our number 3 song, Mama, We're All Crazy Now, I'm also familiar with, but also from Quiet Riot. They covered that on their second album. I guess they figured if Slade was gold one time, they'd be gold the second time. But Evan David says, originally released as a lead-in single to Slade's third studio album, Slade, in August of '72. This rocker will become their third UK number 1 and will later be memorably covered by both Quiet Riot, as I mentioned, and The Runaways. According to Naughty Holder, meanwhile, the song's title came from the London Festival because I was sort of shouting to them, we're all crazy now. Although it was apparently initially supposed to go, my, we're all crazy now, but Chaz Chandler mistakenly thought the band were singing Mama instead, and the new title stuck. Another example of Slade tune that's deliberately written so as to encourage audience participation. This is probably the first Slade song that Evan David heard on a cassette compilation of 70s hits back in the 90s, and I still love it to this day. Wants us to react. This is from Top of the Pops in December of '72, as I feel it amply gets across the sheer wild joy of this tune quite nicely indeed. Plus, as a bonus, it also prominently features Naughty Holder's trademark mirrored hat, whose onstage impact Holder himself later described as follows. I used to stand in the middle of the stage and these huge beams of light used to come out of the hat, and it looked like absolutely phenomenal. And I could move the hat around and light all the audience up with this hat with mirrors. It became a symbol of the glam rock years, really. Mama, We're All Crazy Now, definitely a sing-along anthem. Once again, repeated that songwriting technique of just saying the chorus over and over. At the end, everybody's singing along. If you were watching me in the video below, which I don't know why you'd be watching me because they're way more interesting, but I know every word of this song. It all came back to me. I didn't know the lyrics if I'm watching the video, but you know, I love this song when Quiet Riot came out with it maybe 85 or 86, and it's funny how music, it's amazing. Like, I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I can remember this song the second it hits. It's weird how that works, the power of music. But I actually do like that song better than Come On Feel the Noise too. I don't think most people would say that here in the States that knew the two versions that were popular here from Quiet Riot, but really, really good. Naughty's voice, once again, just so unique. So well done on stage, their persona. They're making some of these people, some of these guys dressed in suits look like they're ready to go to their accounting jobs. No offense to accountants if you're watching this at all. But, you know, they look like they're all uptight, but they're trying to get into it. So I thought that was kind of amusing too. And always love on Top of Pops how they're rocking along with the guitars, yet they're not plugged in. So it's always just a funny thing that they didn't at least try to make it look like they were playing them. But I guess maybe you didn't pick up on it back in the day on small TV screens as you're watching it. But really good choice there. Now we go to number 2, Radio Wall of Sound. Originally released as what turned out to be Slade's penultimate single in October of '91 and eventually reaching 21 in the UK chart. This rollicking, bludgeoning tune first started out as a Jim Lee solo project, hence his unusually prominent vocal role, and would see the band return to Top of the Pops studio for the first time in several years as a result. Although I would like you guys to watch this fan remastered version of it instead, as it's got better sound quality. So that's what we're watching, just an FYI. This somewhat obscure latter-day Slade tune has always been a personal favorite of mine, Evan David says. Hence its high placing on this list, and I really hope you enjoy it. There you have it, number 2 on Evan David's list, Radio Wall of Sound. What's kind of cool to see him in October of '91. It is weird to see Jim Lee in that prominent vocal. It's fine. I prefer Naughty, but that's because what I'm used to. So it was a fine song. Like I said, I like to see him all these years later. Had, you know, that anthemic chorus in there as well. And just really basically an ode to the radio and to music, right? He can't get it out of his blood and out of his brain. So that was number 2. If you're watching along, I'm sure you know what number 1 is. Merry Christmas, everybody. Evan David says, well, what else could I have as number 1, especially at this time of the year as I'm filming this in December? This is a tune above all others that has made Slade truly immortal in their homeland, at least, and indeed has seen perennial Yuletide re-releases over here for many years, to the extent that the British festive season doesn't really seem like it's properly begun until you start hearing Noddy Holder bellowing "It's Christmas" on radio stations and supermarket to Noize all over the land. Its origin, however, are relatively prosaic in that it was apparently inspired by Jim Lee's mother-in-law of all people, who handed him a newspaper article about songwriting one day in which, according to Lee himself, I noticed this thing about White Christmas being around year after year, and I thought, hang about, somebody wrote Happy Birthday, so something that gets within the psyche of the nation or the Western-speaking world would be a better achievement than just any old hit single. And I ran Nod and said, what about a Christmas song? I just got this idea. And Nod said, oh, all right then. So he wrote these lyrics that were fantastic even from the beginning. The song had a magic about it. Holder himself, meanwhile, would later comment that Merry Christmas, Everybody included probably two of the best lines that I ever came up with. Does your granny always tell you that the old songs are the best? Then she's up and rock and rolling with the rest, which every granny does at Christmas. Part of the success of that record at the time was definitely what was going around. There were 3-day weeks. TV was going off at night because of power cuts at 10 o'clock. The whole structure of what was going on in the country was very, very dismal. The Christmas record was very optimistic. I think it lifted people, and I knew that I wanted it to be a very working class lyric that what normal families went through at Christmas time. I'd had a few drinks. I was in good festive spirits. Suddenly these lines were coming into my head. As soon as I got the first line, I knew I was on a roll then. And the funny thing is, it still sounds fresh. Evan David says, well, those stinking Scrooges out there who like to complain about the song being overplayed at this time of year might disagree with that last part, but I, for one, still love this tune. We're reacting to the Top of the Pops 1973 edition. I think I've heard this song once, maybe in a top 10 or something I did, maybe, I don't know. Or maybe I've never heard it, which I know is crazy for you in the UK, but here in America, like I've said all along, we didn't really know Slade. Merry Christmas, everybody. I'm telling you, man, like I said, I might have heard that song once. It's not familiar to me at all, but they did a really good songwriting job on it. Are you hanging up your stocking on your wall? It's that time when Santa has a ball. Does he ride a red-nosed reindeer? Does a ton up on his sleigh? Do the fairies keep him sober for a day? And then the hook. So here it is. Merry Christmas, everybody's having fun. Look to the future now. It's only just begun. Talking about waiting for the family to arrive. And are you hoping that the snow will start? Do you ride down on the hillside in a buggy you have made? When you land upon your head, then you bend Slade. So they get their little Slade. So they're, in the outro. So here it is. Merry Christmas. Everybody's having fun. Look to the future now. It's only just begun. So a very nice job songwriting where it doesn't seem too cliched, but they get everything in there. Very smart of them to do that. Once again, I don't know the song real well, obviously, so it doesn't resonate with me like it would someone in the UK go like, oh no, man, one more time hearing this, or oh man, I love this song. So before I get into my favorites, I'll give you honorable mentions that Evan David had, and there is a bunch of them. Darling, Be Home Soon, the Slade Alive version. Get Down and Get With It. Look What You Done. Goodbye to Jane. Kill 'Em at the Hot Club Tonight. When the Lights Are Out. Them Kind of Monkeys Can't Swing. Summer Song. Thanks for the Memory. We'll Bring the House Down. Wheels Ain't Coming Down. Run, Run Away. Little Sheila. I think I might know that song. I don't know. Maybe I know another song named Little Sheila. All Join Hands, 2-track stereo, 1-track mine. Do We Still Do It? You Boys Make Big Red Noise, and especially Take Me Back Home Every Day. Give Us a Goal, Ruby Red, and Mysterious Mr. Jones. So those are Evan David's honorable mentions. Now we get to my favorite tracks. I got one honorable mention, How Does It Feel, the number 9 song. My favorites are Far, Far Away, My Oh My, Come On Feel the Noise, and Mama, We're All Crazy Now. Once again, I knew those last 3 songs. That might have helped them become favorites, but really good stuff here. A few of my observations of Slade, right? I know they're a huge UK group. Evan David's talked about them a lot. Obviously the research that he provided at the start tells you how big they were with all their success. But what stuck out for me was they're an everyday, everyman band. In other words, like the performances, Noddy always had a smile on his face. They all did. They all always had smiles on their faces. And there's nothing wrong with being serious, right? I'm used to musicians being serious. 95% of them are very, very serious. So you get that. And so when you see somebody with a smile on their face all the time, it really is disarming in that you're like, oh, this guy's one of us. So I think that was probably one of the keys to their charms, man. So really did enjoy that about him. Just seemed like good guys. So Thank you, Evan David, for bringing that and all the research you always bring in informative stuff. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you'd like to support us in any way, as Evan David does, the Patreon link is below and on the end screen. Give it a look. And until next time, guys, I will see you.